Welcome back to Spirit Sherpa. I'm your host, Kelle Sparta, transformational shaman, spiritual coach. And I am here today. We're going to do something fun. We're going to talk about the Chiron effect with the author of the book, Lisa Tahir. But before we get into that, I want to remind you guys to like, subscribe, and share. Don't forget that sharing is caring, and this is one of the ways that you help us grow and therefore help us get out and reach more people. And so I want to thank you in advance for doing that. Think for 1 second, who do you know who would love this podcast? Or who do you know who would really need this podcast? And just take a moment and send a copy to them right now as you're listening. Thank you. Josh will be back on our next episode after this. At least I think it's going to be the next one. We're rearranging things somewhat, so maybe not, but he will be back in the next recording that I'm doing. So that's the important part. So we're going to be doing another interview today. And so I want to remind you guys that, one of the things we're going to talk about on today's episode is some of the mythology of Chiron, not character, but the mythological creature from, I think it's Greek mythology, right? Greek? Yeah. And so we've done a whole lot. We did 4 years of mythology series every 6 weeks. And so there's a whole bunch of mythology series stuff in the backlog of the program. So if you're enjoying learning about Chiron today, don't forget to go back and listen to the other mythological series that we did back in those times. And that is the foundation for the symbology and mythology that you see within ritual, but also the language that spirit speaks to you in is symbology. So the more you learn about mythology, the more you understand how symbology works, the better your communication with your guides and other spirits will be. So with that, I'm going to welcome to the show Lisa Tahir. She is the author of The Chiron Effect. And Lisa, tell us about you and your book.
Sure, Kelle. Thank you so much for having me on your show today. I'm delighted to be with all of you listening and watching. I'm Lisa Tahir, a licensed therapist, licensed clinical social worker in California and Louisiana. I've done this work for almost 30 years. And in the last 10 years, I've really incorporated a person's spirituality and asking what you believe in, because I think that was left out of therapy for a lot of time and seemingly a separate entity in itself, where our belief systems truly underlie everything. Our beliefs inform our actions, both the actions we take and the actions we refrain from. And there might be fear or a belief that we can't or don't deserve. And so I feel like really bringing in one's spirituality and exploring that, and even helping someone, they might not know what they believe right now. They might have been raised in a religion, but that's not resonating in their belief system. So I really love helping people with all of that, Kelle, as a therapist.
That's awesome. So you were kind enough to send me a review copy of your book. And so I want to take a look at that. I have some questions for you directly, but I wanted to ask you about something in particular that was just in the initial table of contents. And the idea that, so first off, Chiron. Actually, before I get to that question, let's go to Chiron and the story of Chiron, because I think that's important.
Yes.
So you talk about the story of Chiron in your book. Do you want to tell them the story of Chiron?
I do, because I think people know more about Chiron than what you may be aware of, meaning that Chiron was a Greek centaur, and he was half man, half horse. Most of the centaurs were warring. They were not sentient. They didn't have higher consciousness, but Chiron did. He was different. He was the founding father of medicine, botany, pharmacy, the healing arts like therapy and medicine. And today, when you go to the doctor and you see the staff of medicine, the two snakes that intertwine, Chiron gave that staff of medicine to Asclepius, whom he tutored. And I thought that was really cool when I started to study Chiron, that he embodies both animal instinct, but mediates that with consciousness, with morality, with awareness of others and himself, and brought balance into the world he lived in. and he was accidentally wounded by a poisonous arrow, which put him in touch of what human suffering feels like. And he traded his life with Prometheus so that he could transition and pass on because it was too much. And I write in my book about the metaphor when life feels too much for us, and some people choose to even take their lives in that kind of pain. And my hope is that by understanding your Chiron placement, it can help soothe and ease pain and suffering and help you instead understand yourself more deeply so that you can start to have more peace in your life.
Now, Chiron is known as the archetype of the wounded healer as a
Hmm.
result of that, right?
Yes, Carl Jung talks about Chiron as the wounded healer in his archetype system. Yes.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah,
so when we talk about the wounded healer in our practice here, it's about people who are trying to do healing work for others without having done much of their own work. And the idea being so the definition that I typically give for people in the current model is if your stuff gets in the way of you being present for someone else, if they happen to accidentally or purposefully trigger you, then if you can't just go oof and put it aside to look at later, then and it's taking up all of your awareness,
yeah.
then you are a wounded healer. You can't be present for the other person's work.
Hmm.
Because your stuff is getting in the way, and that's
Right.
sort of where the definition of today's wounded healer comes from. So I wanted to delineate the difference between the two because Chiron was constantly in pain all the time, right? And
After
so,
being injured, he
right,
was.
after being
Yes,
injured, yeah. And so that constant pain is a distraction
it is.
from the work of healing. And so that's why we do our inner healing work is for the same reason, right?
It is.
And thankfully, we can do the inner healing work, unlike him, which he was immortal and could never be healed and would always be in pain. And there's a point where you can recognize that there's a limit for how much of that you want to deal with. So,
Of course.
okay, so now that we know the myth, the legend of Chiron, why does it matter where Chiron is in our charts? Now, I know that there's a Chiron return that happens around when you're 50, 51, right?
Right.
Okay.
But yeah,
How does that come into play? How does Chiron matter in our charts? Talk about that.
sure. So, what I found to be significant as a therapist, when I asked the universe the question, why do I have so many clients that are very successful, have really good lives, yet they're still experiencing depression and anxiety? And why was I at that time, despite having a lot of internal resources, been in a lot of therapy myself as a client, a lot of self awareness? Why was I still feeling anxiety and depression? And that's when I just started to hear Chiron as a whisper. And it sent me on this deep dive over several years into exploring and learning that there are 12 placements of Chiron in your birth chart. Just like you were born under a sun sign, you have a rising sign, a moon. Chiron is in Aries or Gemini or Scorpio or Cancer, and it means something completely different than your sun sign or your moon. And what is significant about that is that Chiron in your astrological chart reveals an area where you feel vulnerable, where you feel like you might want to hide that part of yourself. It may be that despite your professional success, you never feel good enough, you never quite feel worthy, and you're on that hamster wheel of performance based love, performance based, believing one day I'm going to feel good enough, but you don't. And you're actually really depleted. That's a Chiron and Aries pattern. And as I started to explore Chiron and all of the signs, it's really been helpful to clients and to people to understand like, I don't need to hide this anymore or repress it. Let me look at it and understand how these wounds are gifts that once we stop hiding it, there's a lot of potential healing and that can come from really taking time through empathy and self-forgiveness especially to heal and transform this part of ourselves emotionally.
Okay. And so now you said Chiron, you were mentioning Chiron and Aries. Now, what's the difference between Chiron and Aries and say the first house versus the fifth house versus the 12th house? What does the house matter?
The house placement, you're going to know where this manifests. If you have your time of birth, you can plug it into my interactive website and it'll give you the house placement of Chiron. That just means the area of your life where this manifests. But you're going to know it once you start reading. You're going to know if it's in your just in your self-esteem, in your own mind. People don't really see this or know this about you. It's like a hidden wound, or complex is a word you might use, versus is it in your marriage? Does it show up at the workplace? Is it a public thing? Is it in your health? So you will know that.
Okay.
You don't need to have your time of birth to understand where this shows up.
Okay. And does the Chiron return have anything to do with the stuff that you're talking about here, or is
you
that
know if
different?
if you want to meet with an astrologer, with I'm not, and it can be fun to learn about when you're around the age of 51, your Chiron returns to the place that it was when you were born, and it's a good time to take an inventory. Though I would encourage you to please take inventories before you're 51. I feel like birthdays, it's a really wonderful time to inventory every year and just kind of note where you are, give yourself some praise and affirmation, and identify some intentions of where you'd like to be. So the Chiron return just has to do with it coming back to where it was when you were actually born.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to ask you the question that I started to ask
Yeah.
before, which is, because you were looking at, so you've got a list of all the ways in which the Chiron in whatever sign
Sign.
relates to a specific type of core wounding.
Right.
And so, there's value and worth and neglect and abandonment and creativity. And I understood all of them in the table of contents, except for the one in Gemini, which is in the wounding is in empathic attunement. What does that mean?
Empathetic attunement. Yeah. So, and also
Empathetic
this,
attunement. Sorry. Yes.
it's
Thank you.
okay. And to set the stage, that for some of you, this will be a core wounding when you've experienced things in your upbringing like sexual abuse, neglect, traumas that are like the big T traumas. But for others of you that didn't experience things like that, it might be like an ouch. So it's on a spectrum. And I didn't know how to reflect that in a title. So this is on a spectrum from an ouch placement all the way up to and including a core wounding that really has you doubting yourself, and it's been like a really hard thing for you to feel valuable and worthy. So just to discern that, and people
Okay.
fall everywhere from either end to all along that spectrum. This empathetic attunement wounding has to do with empathetic attunement when children are young, infants up until early childhood. The attunement comes from the caretaker, the mom, the dad, the aunt, whomever is caring. The empathetic attunement is needed for a child to learn that they matter and to know that their needs will be met. And likewise, in our adult relationships, we all have the friends that empathetically attune to us well. We feel heard, we feel seen, we feel like they remember the things going on in our lives, and that feels good, versus the people that are more in their own worlds and they might not remember us. They have an issue with empathetically attuning. Like in music, you're tuning empathetically to each other. It's the seat and source of empathy. And so this Chiron and Gemini person experiences feeling and being misunderstood by their closest loved ones. And it's so painful because you feel like you're being really clear, yet you're misunderstood by your partner, your parents, at work. And it can cause some feelings of real deep anger and a sense of betrayal. And it can really get in your way. And to set the stage even more, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Rihanna, the musician, have their Chiron in the sign of Gemini, and they have really beautifully transformed that wound. And through their gifts, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who endorsed my book, through helping people find compassion for one another and then themselves. And then Katy Perry being the wonderful singer that she is and reaching people through her music. So it's about learning to first attune to yourself, to understand yourself, and then start having conversations with others to find out where that misattunement is happening and get on the same page. Does that help explain it more?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, okay. So now you're looking at the Chiron myth and taking that and paralleling it to the spiritual seeker's path.
Hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Sure. I think for those of you, since those of you that are Spirit Sherpas listeners and watchers, like you're about the spiritual, and that's so important because in my book I talk in the beginning about applying your belief system to this. I have my belief system, you have yours. Take what works, release the rest. But since we're all here with the spiritual understanding that we come from source, we all have source energy in us. We are a part of a whole. And that to me is so beautiful because you can do spiritual practices like as you're learning to empathetically attune and be gentle, forgive yourself. You can also send that energetically to others in your family, in your friends group at work without having to have all the conversations. You can sit in meditation and send love to those individuals, send forgiveness, and it ripples through, as you know, our time frame and field, and others feel it. And it can be such a wonderful healing practice meditatively to do that. What do you think about that, Kelly?
No, I absolutely agree that offering now the I'm going to balance that because you can offer up your love and your support and your forgiveness and everything else. But what you can't do is impose it on someone else. You can hand it to them and say, here, this is available to you if you would like it. But what you don't want to do is say, you're going to experience this, you're going to receive it, because that is black magic as opposed to white magic. We don't do that. We don't need to manipulate others. We didn't like being manipulated as children. We do not like being manipulated now. Therefore, we don't do that to others. But the offering up of it, as you were describing, is in fact a great practice for you as well as for the person if their energy and their higher self chooses to receive it.
Well, and
Um,
that's why I suggest you don't
yeah,
need to say this to them. You're
right,
doing this. You can
exactly.
call in even, you can call in like someone's soul. Would you like to commune with me in this energetic meditative space and send, and even say, I'm so sorry. Once you really start to understand this self-forgiveness piece and releasing ourselves from the layers of judgment that I think as women, we especially can be really hard on ourselves when we don't meet our own expectations, which are often so very high, and we might not be allowing ourselves enough flexibility to, we don't have to do it all today, and really start in that practice going through the layers. People inevitably are going to come up, and you can just release them as well in your mind with a prayer, with a thought. And next time you see them, it can often be very surprising how naturally well and better things start to go as you engage in this kind of practice with yourself and the universe.
Yes, absolutely. So, in your book, you talk about orbit patterns.
Hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about what those mean and how that plays out?
Sure, Kelly. It's very simply our people, places, and things. We call it our daily routine, and that's our orbit. We habituate people, places, and things. And I see us as mini solar systems. I have my people, places, and things. So do others. And we kind of are circling each other. And hopefully a lot of that is what you want in your life and what you enjoy in your life. Though at different times in my life, I haven't really liked all my orbit patterns and such that I was encountering. And I learned the biggest, most important thing to do to change that was to change my own, like notice my thoughts, what am I thinking, and how that influences my belief systems and the beliefs I need to change out and swap out. And in my book, I offer some takeaway steps because often it was me feeling unworthy, my feeling not good enough, feeling like I'm not deserving. Wow, I don't want to hold on to that anymore. Like I want to see life show me that I'm worthy and deserving. And what is something I can do today kind of to take that step in my own life? It might be not to call or text someone like I used to, and it might be to reach out to someone else. It might be to do less instead of more. And you'll know when you start asking yourself, what am I called to do or what am I actually called to refrain from? To allow something new to emerge in my life.
Yeah. You're hitting on one of my pet peeve topics, which is worthiness and deserving, right?
Okay.
And I'm going to share with you what I share with my listeners, which
I'd
is
love to hear.
worthiness. So if we assume that we are God and God is us, right?
Mhm.
We are everything and everything is us,
Yes.
then worthiness is a nonsensical term.
Right.
How can you be worthy or not worthy of that which you already are?
Exactly.
Right. And deserving is a term, worthy and deserving are both terms used to manipulate us into doing more than we are comfortable doing, to being something that we don't want to be or aren't. It is they're terms used to twist us into pretzels. And
Hmm.
whether that's somebody else twisting us or us twisting ourselves, it doesn't
Yes.
matter, right?
Yeah.
Same thing, but it's a manipulation that is inherently abusive.
Yeah.
And so I generally unwind those terms with that concept.
Hmm.
And rather than, proving to yourself that you're worthy, you need to prove to yourself that it's crap, right?
Yes.
It's just
And
like,
we
this is
are.
bullshit, man. This is
Yeah.
bullshit. I don't like it, right? Yeah. So I love that. Okay. So how are you integrating Chiron into your therapy and healing sessions? How does that work? How would somebody do that, even if they're not an astrologer?
Sure. That's a great question. I always start with where someone is, Kelly, when they come in. I want to know what got you to make the call or send the email because I want for you to experience some relief in the here and now in that first session. And I'll weave in as it's important Chiron information. And so it's something tangible and practical for you. I really love practical wisdom, things that you can take and use in your own life. I find that very exciting. So I'll kind of weave it in as it's pertinent to be woven in. So you can know this is a template, and the biggest thing, one of the biggest things I've been excited about, like Kelly, I used to struggle with this astrology thing, feeling like it's prescribed to me. Like, are you telling me this map dictates who I am? And I had the biggest download in the last couple of years. And it was like, no, Lisa, you wrote your birth chart. You
Right.
authored it. Like, this is what you thought you wanted to experience in this life. And now that you're here, you get to learn things to change my future and experience more of what I want, less of what I don't. And that was so exciting for me to share with people. Like, you get to author your life. How do you feel about that?
No, I absolutely agree with that. You choose your parents, you choose your birth date, you choose your birth time, and that's how that flies. So,
Yeah,
I can't tell you how many people I've heard where they were like, "Well, we induced labor, but it took four more days or whatever," right?
totally. I've been hearing
Yeah.
that too, 100%.
Yeah. And it's
Yes,
just like, well, yeah, that's because you were trying to skip
yes,
the intended birth time
it
and
is.
day.
Exactly.
And
It's like
we're gonna be
wild.
like, nope, that's not how that's flying, right?
Right.
So yeah.
Yes.
Which is why I always laugh because I was born on Samhain at 3:48 in the morning. So I was like, I'm big surprise. I'm the queen of transformation when I'm born on the day of the veil being thinnest between the worlds at a
Yes.
time when the veil is thinnest between the worlds in that 3 a.m. slot.
Yes.
So
Not
yeah,
surprising at all with who
not
you are.
surprising at all. And then,
Yeah.
my friend Kathy, who I do a lot of retreat work with, she is born on Yule. So between us, we bookend time out of time in the
Yeah.
Celtic calendar. And so, big surprise, stunner, not
Right.
so much. But yeah, it's always entertaining to look at these things. Now, one of the things that we're seeing a lot right now, and I don't like to talk politics much on this podcast because it's very polarizing, but um, you are talking about healing the collective using Chiron. And so, you included a section in the book on psychoastrology in the US, right?
Right.
So how does individual healing support collective healing, especially in the age of mass awakening?
Sure. So, this is my experience. In my experience, as we really take responsibility for our own healing, I believe that's what affects the collective. That I can, I'm responsible for myself, not you or them or whomever. And when we really get like into our own personal transformation and healing and just really shining our light, that's what I believe really transforms the globe. Like, I'm really at the individual level, that's what lights me up, is helping you one on one transform yourself, and then you become a more loving and whole person, and that affects the people you work with, it affects your family, it just your neighborhood, your community, it does so much. Just you as an individual, we can do so much as a
Yeah.
self, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. The I totally agree with you. I'm actually working with people who are in the 100,000, which is what I call it when there are 100,000 of us who are on the planet to up level it right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm actually teaching people every couple of weeks. I'm teaching people a class on how to expand, how you hold energy, how to hold energy effectively, and then how to connect into the other people who are on the planet to do the up leveling so that we can create the grid that
Yes.
ultimately up levels the whole planet. And so I can speak from experience from 25 years of doing this stuff that every time someone wakes up, the people around them wake up a little bit,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
if they are unwilling to wake up, they will remove themselves from your life.
Yep.
That
Yep.
happens a lot too,
Yep. It
right?
does.
But the ripple effect is massive and
Mm-hmm.
it's significant, right?
It is.
So uh, every time we do a piece of our own work, we really do a piece of work for the whole world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, there was, I don't remember where it came from. There's a book that came out recently. It's a political book, but it says that it only takes 3.5% of any given population to make a sea change in
Wow.
in the culture.
Okay.
And so if you consider that, that's not a lot of people on the planet,
No, it's
right?
not.
Yeah. So I love that. I love that
Mm-hmm.
doing your own work can be enough, right?
Yes.
Sometimes that's all it is. It just has to be enough.
Yes. And then you tend to be drawn to others like-hearted and like-minded, and it just feels
Right.
so delightful as that happens.
Yes, exactly. So, you have some daily and seasonal rituals that you're using to maintain alignment, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to share those with us?
Sure.
And
Yeah,
I'd love to hear about the energetic hygiene practices you're doing too, because almost nobody talks about energetic hygiene, and I am hyper vigilant on energetic hygiene. So,
yes,
yes.
yes. Every day I start my day with a cup of black coffee and meditation before I go checking my email or start texting or calling anyone. I feel like it's really important, even if it's 5 minutes, to take that for oneself. And I always I say thank you, and I feel it, I mean it. I ask for guidance, I ask for clarity, I ask to just have a wonderful day, to receive blessings, to be a blessing, to help with any confusion, and I trade that out for clarity. I love reading A Course in Miracles, so I might read one of my favorite lessons. Right now I'm on lesson 77, and I've been reading it for months. I am entitled to miracles, and it just really, really like lights me up. I like every day I'm just wanting to have that awareness. And then I to cleanse myself when I feel like when I've been out, especially New Orleans, out in some of the parades. We spoke about Mardi Gras. You used to live here,
Yep.
and in that denser energy, I'll come home and I'll use Palo Santo and or sage to just kind of burn. And I love the smell, the aroma, and I cleanse. I'll do that in my home as well. If I start to feel kind of like weighted down emotionally by something, and I'll ask God and the universe to cleanse me and free me from any energy that's not my own. I release it lovingly to be transmuted into the nothingness from which it came. And just those are some of my practices. I'm curious
That's all.
about yours.
So I do a regular energy clearing process, but I've also got my house warded. So my house has actually got energetic protection set up.
Okay.
And so they automatically peel off anything I might have caught when I was out and about,
Yeah.
which is I'm all for automated systems
Yeah.
because remembering to do something on the daily is not really my thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do energy clearing when I feel like I need it, if I'm feeling sort of right.
Mm-hmm.
And I do sage somewhat regularly. It just depends upon how I'm feeling. And so, I've got a lot of different practices. And if I'm working with clients, that's the other thing that I do is if I'm dipping into somebody's energy field, I'm pulling back from that for one, because a lot of
Yeah.
people forget to pull back from it. And
Right.
then I'm clearing my energy field, and I'm clearing theirs of anything of mine that might have come with
Right.
me. And so that's part of the energetic hygiene that I do for my practices.
I
So
like that.
yeah. Um, okay, so last thing I want to hit on is Chiron in business and leadership.
Hmm.
Talk to me about that. How does that impact business?
It can be really fun to take, say, the date you incorporated, your LLC date on that document, the date of your marriage or your first date, a significant date, and run it through. I just have a free interactive website where you can put that date in and it generates immediately. Chiron is in. You can find it, things like that elsewhere, but it can be so illuminating to see where there might be a vulnerability in your business or in your relationship, to be able to have that awareness and then be mindful of it, to just be mindful and aware. And I can give you an example. I put in the date that I incorporated my business several years ago, and it came up with the Chiron in Libra, having to do with contracts, both personal, like marriage, and business related. And in that very moment, I was in a situation where I signed a contract without reading it properly, and I wanted to get out of it. And it was so illuminating because the message was to be more mindful of contracts before I signed them. And I was able to negotiate. I didn't get all of my money back, but it was a beautiful learning opportunity to see that that was accurate for me, to just be mindful of the things I'm signing. And if I don't understand, to ask questions. And if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. So to honor your intuition as well, I think is really important.
Yeah, I find that energetics interact with business in so many ways. It's a
Yeah.
little terrifying how much, but
We could be aware though. We could
yeah,
be aware and mindful.
yeah, it's super helpful. So, all right. So, you've mentioned a couple times that people could come and use the thing on your site. So,
Yeah.
how does that work, and where do they find that?
So you can go, my website is nolatherapy.com. It stands for New Orleans, Los Angeles Therapy.com. And there's a button that says my book. You can click that, or you can go to nolatherapy.com/Chiron, and you can read about Chiron and then enter your dates that are significant and receive the Chiron placement. And I'd love for you to check that out for yourself.
Awesome. So, and you've got a special offer for my people too, don't you?
I do, Kelly. I would love to offer anyone interested to book a session with me at half off. So instead of $190, it'll be $95 by Zoom or phone, 45 minutes. I can look into in advance your Chiron placement, share with you any insights about that. Like, I'll come prepared, and it'll give you an experience of how this information could help your life. And just email me, lisa@nolatherapy.com. Mention Kelly, mention her podcast, and I will set that up with you directly.
Awesome.
Yeah, be my
All right.
pleasure.
Well, this has been amazing, and I really appreciate you coming out. Just a reminder to our listeners to like, subscribe, and share. If this hit the buttons for you for with any reason, and you think there's somebody who would appreciate this episode, please do share it with them. And that's it for this week. Remember that what you focus on expands. What you intend is what you create. So choose wisely.